one of the things I do like using when I'm looking for news is I just hit the news button here on the side of the charts. That'll pull up live news for whatever ticker I'm looking at. That's a quick way of catching whatever's going on the news feed that might be applicable to the chart that I'm viewing. However, I've always found that you're going to see the evidence of something before you catch the news that's associated with it. So if you're in a trade, you're probably not going to see the news fast enough to react to it. I don't know if I'd consider it noise. I think the problem is that when you have so many new impetuses for trade that aren't related to the chart, you can kind of convince yourself that things are better than they are, or more likely, I shouldn't say better, more likely to confirm a trade necessarily than they really are. There's no guarantee that that news is being disseminated out to everyone at the same speed. Not everyone's looking at the news feed. A lot of people are just technically trading that chart for that day. And as a trader, I mean, let's be real, you're not here to read or interpret the news. You're not an analyst. Your job as a trader is to read and react to the chart. Yeah, so we haven't gone through what the scanner is, but of course you can kind of figure out what I'm referring to. Something that's actively scanning for and finding VWAP setups in the moment. That, because it does 90% of my job pretty much for me, it does all of the finding and bringing to my attention at the right time trade setups. Yeah, I haven't done prep work in a long time. What I've found too is that since we're waiting to react to chart events based on that VWAP for that day, we can't really know the behavior of any given market based on some news early on. I mean, we can see if it's gapping up or gapping down, but we don't know if that's going to be a new accepted price and continue in that direction, or if it's going to fade the gap, meaning revert and go the opposite direction as the gap. That's part of the beauty of VWAP in a sense, is that it's related to real-time information. And the worst part about VWAP is, yeah, you can't do any prep work with it because you're waiting for that real-time benchmark. But absolutely, the scanner is a lifesaver in terms of time and efficiency. Like I said, it directs my attention to the charts that are setting up when they are setting up, rather than seeing them after the fact, or what's all more common, you end up looking at 100 charts, 3 of them maybe are setting up in the right at the right time when you happen to type in that ticker. So the challenge with the slope indicator is that it is a periodic measurement, meaning it's only looking at the slope of VWAP over the last couple bars. So the benefit of that is it's going to be very responsive, but it's going to be very jagged and hard to read sometimes. So you'll notice that it kind of decays in intensity and then picks back up, and then it decays in intensity and picks back up. It's very jagged in that sense. One of the options I built into this indicator, I'm going to right click on it and choose Edit Study. One of the options here is slope length, and that's the number of bars over which the slope is calculated. So by default, it's just 5 1-minute bars. If we change this to something like 25, what will happen is we're going to see the same indicator set down here, but presented in a much slower, less responsive, but more smoothed format. So I'm going to click Apply here, and I want everyone to pay attention to this area that I'm circling with my cursor right now. You're going to see about the same thing, but much smoother. There we go. So now, while this would give you a cleaner signal and something that's easier to read, we're adding 20 bars of a lag, in a sense, to this indicator. So we're going to get slower responsiveness in exchange for easier readability. So I want to be crystal clear about 2 things. One, I am cautious of trading the day of earnings or going into earnings. But coming out of earnings, trading just after earnings, very reasonable. Because at that point, all the information is out there. We know the algorithms and high institutional interest is going to be there. The likelihood of VWAP playing out or being respected is significantly higher than in a just normal day with low volume, low volatility. So combining it with earnings plays or using a multi-day VWAP on earnings plays, absolutely, I am in support of that. I think what you're referring to when you asked this question was when people say the 1 minute reversal. This is a little quirk of Thinkorswim, and I think I know who you're referring to, who talks about that specifically. The quirk in Thinkorswim is that when we call a chart of a certain bar size, so if we say a 1 minute chart, that tends to connect to or correlate with a length of time, not just a bar size. So what I mean by that is a 1 minute chart defaults to the 1 day, 1 minute chart sort of setup. So sometimes people will refer to a length of chart, meaning how many days am I looking at, by referring to the size of the bars. Does that make sense? They mean one historical day, but they're referring to it by the size of the bars. Another example would be if I said, hey, what about the 5 minute reversal? Well, that would be referring to a 5-day chart, because the default time frame associated with a 5 minute candle size in Thinkorswim is 5 days. So what I think they're referring to when they say a multi-day 1 minute reversal is they're talking about yesterday's VWAP and specifically the market, the chart, bouncing off of or rejecting at or reversing from, right, that multi-day VWAP. And that's something like, obviously, for the last hour, we've just gone through quite a bit. So I think they're using a different phrase to talk about something that's very similar to what I teach. And that's really just yesterday's VWAP. So that's a good question. What I think you're referring to is that there needs to be some kind of separation. So let me draw an example here. If we have, let's say, an intraday VWAP, and then the stock gaps down significantly, we want to know, so here we'll draw a price, doing something like this, and it sells off, and then it gaps down significantly. Is that where we'd expect enough separation between the prior day's trading and today's trading for this to become a viable VWAP? Yeah, I don't know if I'd put a minimum threshold on it, but enough that there's a visible shift or curvature to the VWAP. You want to see the VWAP actually changing, because otherwise we're just dealing with kind of like flat or horizontal level, which is more likely to beget that same kind of counter trend, oscillating, choppy behavior that we'd expect. You would almost be stuck in between the kind of slow lanes from the prior day, with some separation. So I'd say maybe a 0.5% or more. I don't know if I'd give it a full percent, but that is a good instinct. That is good instinct, that there needs to be some separation and then movement of the VWAP in order for it to be valid. I mean, it's definitely valid without a gap. It's more valid with some separation or movement. Obviously, you are correct in the way you framed it, that a higher time frame is going to smooth out price action or reduce noise and jaggedness of the chart. For the average trader, yes, I wouldn't require them to watch, let's say, a 1 minute chart. I tend to watch a 1 minute chart because I want to see the detail and granularity with which the market interacts with VWAP, how many bars it takes, the nature of the bars, how expediently it pops off of the VWAP, all the kind of 1 minute detail you'd expect. The limit I put on that upper kind of time frame is around 15 minutes. I think at that point you stop seeing the kind of nature of how a market responds to VWAP. It can all happen within one 15-minute candle. So that's really the key. And I think that's why person asking the question made a good point about, hey, what about 2 minutes or 5 minutes? He's just edging higher up on the time frame scale rather than jumping to like, why aren't you using an hourly? Which obviously loses so much resolution and granularity. It's kind of self-defeating. I think when I'm trading, I don't vary much between 1 minute, 5 minute. That's kind of my steady ground. I used to watch tick charts years ago, but that's a separate discussion. And no, I've never really been a fan of the higher time frames. I think the highest time frame I'd watch is like a 30-minute, maybe on a 180-day chart or something like that. That gives me the same kind of granularity across many days, but it also gives me many days of content and context.